Okay, it's another episode of Rise Up with Marc Mixon. Hello, Adam.
Hello, Mark.
And, hello to our listeners and viewers. It has been a minute. It's been, about 6 weeks since our last podcast.
Yeah,
Um,
about. Yeah,
we,
October 7th is when we dropped the last one. So,
all right. So maybe not quite 6 weeks, but it's, we had this issue right after we started the podcast last year. If we end up doing seasons, I think the season may have to end as my day job semester really kicks up. It seems like
yeah.
fall semester is a time that I just don't quite have enough time to keep all the irons in the fire at the same time. So,
Yeah,
but,
and it was a little unfortunate for this year since we dropped off the face of the earth right when the election kicked in, and we are a political podcast, but
yeah, it was unfortunate, but we had a lot of great outcomes and a lot of terrible outcomes this election season.
yes, we did, and we
Um,
kind of expected that.
yeah, and so we're going to talk about them here today. Let me do the little self pimping stuff. If you are like this content, go ahead and like and subscribe. If you're joining us on the live stream, go ahead and hit the like button, share it with your friends. Go ahead and uh, join regularly, join often. I don't know. Follow us on the social medias, and if you're catching us on the podcast, please subscribe. Get your friends subscribing and engage with the show. Let us know now that the election is over, what sort of activists and politicians do you want to hear from? Let's continue that discussion about how we everyday people can really rise up and make the real change that we all need. How to do it successfully. What are those steps? How do we need to get that done? So if you are an activist who want to join, shoot us a line. Adam's got if you're watching, Adam's got our various banners streaming. I feel like that's a new banner. It's blue.
Yeah, I went blue today, mostly because I kind of I have to change it for when I'm doing green streams, so I had to switch it back and thought I'd go with
Fair.
blue. Our colors are red, white, and blue, so it works out.
There you go. This is the true patriotism of a podcast. People
That's
being
right.
involved in democracy, not voting, but like real democracy, participating. I like to say at the end of the podcast, this is not a spectator sport. And if you don't get involved and be active, it's not going to work. You're going to allow other people to have power over you.
That's right.
Okay. So
And
today,
I'm just remembering now, just to mention that I needed to set up the live stream for Rumble. So I'm getting that together right now.
Oh, Rumble. Yeah, no, we ought to do that. Sometimes we get more views on Rumble than on the YouTube.
That's right. Just making sure that I have the correct information in here, and we'll be all set there too.
All right, so we'll delay for a moment while the Rumble live stream gets going.
Yeah, here we go. Please allow 30 seconds to take effect. Okay, and let me just go back over here. Yes, that is ready. Save changes, and we are up.
Okay. Well, then, Rumble, welcome to the live stream. I'm not gonna re-say the things I am going to talk about today. So today we have as a guest someone I've probably mentioned on the podcast before because much of this last year I spent acting as his campaign manager in his third run for Congress. And then before his run was even done, he signed up to be the campaign manager for the Jill Stein for President campaign. Because the man just one of these political activists who seems to never sleep and just continually doing the work. So I wanted to bring him on, talk about what went well, what went poorly, help us in our election analysis, and to talk about what the way forward is for the Green Party, for the left, for all of us who want to make some real significant progressive change in our society. So let's go ahead and run our transition. When we come back, we'll be on live with Jason Call.
Okay. We'll be right back, everybody.
All right.
Some answers, a little bit of truth. Some answers, a little bit of truth. Some answers, a little bit of truth. A little bit of truth. A little bit of truth. Oh, dig deeper. Keep looking for the proof. Dig deeper. Keep looking for the proof. Dig deeper. Keep looking for the proof. Keep looking for the proof. Keep looking for the proof. Oh, some answers.
Okay.
Okay. Jason, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Mark and Adam. Appreciate it very much. Looking forward to having a good conversation here.
Yeah. Well, as we get started, I gave a little bit of an introduction, but it seems odd to me that at this point people wouldn't know who you are. But but for those who don't, why don't you go ahead and give a bit of an introduction?
All right. So I'm former congressional candidate in Washington's 2nd District, ran this last cycle as a Green Party member. Recent joiner to the Green Party. Recent now is, 2 years. But, joining in an official capacity. But my long history of activism goes back to 1990 with anti-war protests, with the first Iraq War, the Desert Storm War. And through the 90s, I was actually a Green Party voter. I just did not get involved in the organizational politics side of it. I did anti-war activism, and excuse me, I voted. I voted Green, but did not really get into electoral politics. And so people know I did work within the Democratic Party for a long time. Kind of got pulled into the Democratic Party in 2003 with the Iraq War protests, and feeling like we had to get George Bush and Dick Cheney out of office in 2004. Sidebar, never did I imagine that the Democratic Party 20 years later would be rehabilitating Dick Cheney. That is are we allowed to curse on the show?
Oh,
yeah.
No cursing. No cursing.
Curse all you want.
No. Wow. I don't, just very, very surreal to see that happening. But, worked within the Democratic Party through Obama, happy Obama got elected. Very, very happy to see him go, because as many people say, what happened through the Obama presidency is that the mask really, for those of us who really were hoping the Democratic Party would be a progressive organization moving forward out of the Iraq War years. Obama shattered all of those expectations in a bad way, not in a glass ceiling way, but in a bad way. Was very involved in the Bernie movement here in Washington State, particularly in 2016. And then, once the DNC did Bernie in a second time around, while I ran for Congress as a Democrat, I had already extricated myself from the Democratic Party and really was only running as a Democrat because, did not consider that third party options were quote unquote viable. And running as a Democrat in 2020, I did get very close to the general election. Came in a close third place here in Washington State, came in a fairly close third place in 2022 as a Democrat also. But my numbers as a Green Party candidate for the same district, running on the same platform, same policies, of course, were abysmally low. I mean, it was really an eye opener that I felt like people locally are still incredibly bound to duopoly thinking. And so I think we've got real work to do. And the Stein campaign stayed on good message, throughout the campaign season, we highlighted Gaza and the genocide in Palestine as, sort of the quintessential reason that we have to, and very openly and unapologetically, we have to put an end to the American empire. And so now where we are is, how do we capitalize on the momentum? Because there is momentum. There's more momentum than I think the numbers show. How do we capitalize on the momentum and grow out the Green Party or a coalition of the left so that we can tackle things electorally? I know probably a lot of people listening are not sold on electoral politics. I personally am not fully sold on electoral politics, but I do think it is a tool in the tool bag that we should figure out if we can exercise. I know there's some disagreement about that in activist and left circles, but I guess that's what we're here to discuss today.
Yeah, I want to step back a hair. Because I think we want to talk about all that. I want to talk about not about your campaign, our campaign, so much. But when I met you, I was doing some of the third-party organizing, though, within the grift organization known as MPP.
Yep, remember that.
And you and I had a conversation. I was asking, why are you running within the Democrats? Because all the things you said online were clearly not aligned with them. And you told me back then that even though you felt that they were terrible and probably could not be reformed, you also said that the only way to get elected was with a D behind your name. And I disagreed with that then. I felt, and I still disagree with every time I hear the horse shit. Third parties are not viable. It's going to be one of these two. I feel like, well, as long as you, random person on Twitter, are willing to vote for things that you claim to despise, you're right. But as soon as all you people are willing to vote for your values, I think a third party could win. At the same time, as you said, the numbers that we had, and I was my first time trying to manage a campaign, didn't really know what I was doing. I think it was a great experience for me. I loved the chances I had to sometimes sit and listen in on the calls. As you started the Stein campaign, really taught me more about what a campaign manager should do. So I will absolutely take my share of responsibility for that. But at the same time, a huge part of me feels like the Democrats' constant demonization of the Green Party since Nader over the last 24 years has really sort of infiltrated the public's mind. And in Washington, you can't spoil the election. Washington has voted solidly Democratic since Reagan. And anyone who feels that they want something more, it's safe to vote Green Party, but we can't get them to do it. As I was doing the phone banking and text banking for your campaign, I'd have people all the time in the primary say, well, we can't throw this election to Trump. And the amount of disengagement that people have from the system, the ignorance about how primaries versus general work and how elections can truly be spoiled or not is just staggering. And so I don't want to say that I've changed my mind. I still think the Democrats can't be reformed. I still think that there must be a different way forward because I think the Democratic Party is where progressive politicians and candidates go to be destroyed. And yet, I look at what Melissa Chaudhry's numbers were, and I feel like had you been running as a Democrat, I still, I think your numbers would have been closer to Melissa's rather than what we got. So
what were Melissa's numbers? I honestly have not even looked.
She got about 28% of the vote, which was
and it's still nothing when it comes right down to it. That's still nothing, and those are still people all voting within the Democratic Party. And you probably saw my ballot. I did not vote. There were a couple of local Democrats. Obviously, I voted for Jill for the presidential primary, but I did not vote for my congressional representative. Like, I wasn't going to vote for Susan Del Bene or Jeb Brewer, whatever the heck his name was. I was not going to vote for Mira Cantwell or who, I don't even remember the guy who was running on the Republican side for, it doesn't matter because they weren't going to get my vote. So most of the races, same thing for governor. I did not vote for governor. I don't mind telling people this, and I'm a person who has voted Democrat as the lesser of two evils my entire life. And when there has been a third party left option, I have voted for that. And in the primaries, I have voted to the left to try and push our general election options. But in all of my other races, I have voted for the lesser of two evils. I was not going to vote for the lesser of two evils in this election. I wasn't going to give them, there were, since in the 38th legislative district here, I happen to know personally the two people who are running as candidates with the Democratic Party. And I know that they are good people within that system. Like, all things considered, they'd probably rather not be Democrats. They'd rather probably be some left. And so I gave them my vote specifically, but in every other race, I voted against all the initiatives because they're all right-wing initiatives. I voted for funding my school district, and then every other race. And then there were a couple of judicial things that I did an analysis on, and I said, I'll vote because that's nonpartisan. I said, okay, I'll vote for the better judge here, who I feel is the better judge. I thought that was important, although that's that's all within a very, what do I want to say? As a prison abolitionist myself, as somebody who opposes the carceral state, I think voting in those races to do, I guess, harm reduction at the judicial level, I think is important. Like, am I going to be voting for people who really wants to lock people up? I don't want to vote for people who really wants to really. And so there were a couple of choices there that I felt like I could reasonably. Every other race, I wrote in Free Palestine as a write-in, and people are, I publicized that, and people were mad at me. Oh, that's a wasted vote. You don't get to tell me whether my vote is wasted.
Right.
I'll do what I want with my vote. I voted for the people that I felt were worth voting for, and I simply rejected the rest of them. And I don't know what voter turnout was, but I imagine voter turnout was probably around 60%, as it usually is. Maybe as high as 65%. I haven't even looked. Honestly, I have not even looked at the numbers. But for people to say, "Oh, you wasted your vote," I'm like, go talk to the 35% of the people who did not feel that anybody was worth voting for in Washington State, which is the easiest state in the country to vote in. That they didn't even feel it was worth walking their ballot to the mailbox. That's how disengaged people are with our political system right now, and it's been like that for decades. So I reject the idea that I wasted my vote. I was not going to. My vote was not going to endorse genocider Susan Del Bene or genocider Maria Cantwell. It wasn't gonna happen. So I'm very comfortable with the way I filled in my ballot. And where we are now is how do we bring all the people who are disenchanted, because it's a stunning thing to see that 15 million approximately fewer voters voted for Kamala Harris than voted for Joe Biden.
Mhm.
That's I think really where we need to capitalize on the left or with the working class is that the Democratic Party, in my opinion, is on its way out. If anybody wanted to say what is the real takeaway from this election, Democratic Party is toast. The question is, for all the people, what percentage? I think it's upwards of 70% of the general public. I don't know if that number is correct, but I want to say it's around there. Is either definitely in support or definitely entertain the idea of a third party system, a third party or a multi-party system. And I think that they're tired of being pigeonholed towards these two parties that ultimately don't represent their interests as working people, as marginalized communities, as people who are concerned about climate change, as people who are concerned about economic inequality, as people who are struggling to pay rent and pay for healthcare. And this is honestly, this is our Green Party messaging all the way through the campaign. And for people who are tired of our foreign policy being one of global military hegemony that is willing to just go do it. It's do as we say, not as we do policy. That is willing to just constantly be poking around the world to make sure that our interests are served. And when I say our interests, I don't mean the interests of the American people. I mean the interests of the war machine contractors and the fossil fuel industry. Those interests, to make sure that those interests are served and we have dominance there, rather than which pushes us closer and closer to nuclear war. I mean, we're closer to nuclear war. I've talked to experts who have been studying this, and everybody pretty much agrees we're closer to nuclear war than we have been. Ironically, or no, not ironically, coincidentally, yesterday was the anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Where at that time, at the end of the 80s, that was my freshman year in college, that we were all somewhat breathing a sigh of relief, maybe, because I remember growing up through the 80s, like in the early 80s, the threat of remember that movie The Day After with Jason Robart?
Yeah.
Scared the piss out of me. I was in sixth grade. I was like, what? Nuclear war? What the hell is this? And then we grew up with the shadow of nuclear war all the way through the 80s. So we all kind of breathe a collective sigh of relief at the end of the 80s that we're going to have some peace and some sort of cooperation. And now here we are 35 years later, and we are closer to nuclear war than ever. And people are figuring it out that it is the two-party system. Like, there is no functional difference in terms of the oligarchy and the systems of control. There's no functional difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. The Democrats are not reformable. Anybody listening to this who thinks, and I'm sure nobody listening to this podcast probably would, but should somebody listen to this out there in the wider world who has a notion that the Democrats might come around, all you got to do is look at the 4 years of Biden. And Biden was a worse president. I don't remember. I got in a lot of fights in 2020 over what a trash president. The Democrats were like, all right, well, Biden's our guy and we got to get behind him. We got to be enthusiastic and go, Joe. I'm riding with Joe, licking an ice cream cone, sunglasses on. We're riding with Joe. And I was like, have you guys tracked this guy's history for the last 40 years? Have you tracked his history for the last 40 years? You're not getting anything out of this guy. And it was worse than I predicted. So, I don't know where I was going with that, but I'm happy with my vote. Democrats are trash, and we've got to build something better.
Yeah, I voted similarly. I wrote in a lot of people, which, wasted vote. I don't think they would be counted. I feel like in Washington, if you don't register as a write-in candidate,
no, they won't. They won't be counted. That's fine.
So you're right. But I still wrote in Andre Stackhouse for governor, who ran as the Green Party. I think I wrote you in for lieutenant governor. I don't,
I'll take it.
I would say that, and what I have routinely said for years now is that if you are in a quote safe state, whether it's safe red or safe blue, the only way to waste your vote is to vote for that party that's going to win already. In a plurality system, there's millions of people who their entire vote is reduced to +1, right?
Yeah.
So why not spend it in Washington? I think we went for Kamala by 20 points, right? I think that it was a huge swing for Kamala. So that means that of our 5 million voters, I think we had a little less than 60% turnout here in Washington is the early results, 58, 59%. Of our 5 million potential voters.
That's still that's extremely unenthused voting.
Extremely unenthused. Yeah. They just, and what I've been saying this time, like I was prepared to spend the next 4 years saying, yep, you're right. I cost Kamala the election. We made sure she lost, and we're going to keep making sure she loses until the Democrats change. But
and there are some Democrats who are so mad at that, and their messaging in return is like, oh, so you're willing to throw marginalized communities, you're willing to throw the LGBTQ community, the Black community, you're willing to throw them under the bus. And my response to them is like, when have the Democrats seriously talked about protecting those communities? It's all lip service.
Yeah.
It's all lip service. The Democrats aren't protecting those communities. And Kamala basically said right out, well, we're going to do whatever state law is, we'll follow state law, but there's no move to actually really codify and protect the transgender community, for instance. Nothing. There's nothing. We'll follow state law. All right. So basically you're saying that in all of these conservative states where they don't see transgender people as actual people, you're okay with that. You're satisfied with that. That's the level of like disinterest the Democratic Party has in actual policy that helps people. But we've known this forever. Like, we knew it with the George, it was apparent with the George Floyd movement, that Democrats were fine with armed crackdowns on, so what we saw with the Palestine protests on campus, that followed right along with the Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd movement protests, where people were getting pepper sprayed and jailed and abused by police across the country. Democrats are fully behind that kind of thing. They're an authority, but people don't seem to understand how authoritarian the Democratic Party is, and especially with Joe Biden at the helm, and then Kamala bragging like, yeah, I was the top cop in the nation. Like, yeah, we know you were. You threw people in jail for their kids being truant. We're quite aware. And then you laughed about it and you thought it was funny. But that is your engagement with the general public. You still don't see the general public as actual real people with real lives that are concerned. All you see them as are potential voters, and you're willing to do the bare minimum, and in this case, not even that, the bare minimum to say, can we squeak out an electoral win without giving too much of what our corporate donors want to make sure that we maintain, which is exactly like the only truth that Joe Biden ever freaking spoke was before the election, when he told his wealthy donors nothing will fundamentally change. And it hasn't. And not only has it not changed, everything's gotten worse. And we're in a position yet again in 2024, we were in a position of like, is this the best our country can offer? These two parties, these two candidates, from 2016 to 2020, everything got worse. From 2020 to 2024, everything got worse. Billionaires tripled their wealth through a pandemic, and people died and got evicted, and we didn't get the health care we needed, and 330,000 people died through COVID because they simply didn't have the healthcare services that we needed. And the Democrats are doing nothing to shore up those systems or try and build out those systems, that infrastructure that's needed, so that the masses, right, the unwashed masses, can actually live their lives in dignity. Democrats don't give a shit about that. No. They just don't.
No, I've said for years, because I believe we're in a time of political realignment. I'm not convinced the Democrats are toast, but they're never going to be, they're not reformable. Like, so this election, I would say all the time, Democrats need to lose until they change. And that is, I will admit to my listeners and anyone who follows me on Twitter, that was disingenuous. I don't think Democrats are going to fucking change. There's no chance for it.
Well, can I actually speak to that real quick?
Yeah.
Good points from everybody here. I've been listening to some leftist podcasts and things, and it's interesting because there's kind of two thoughts going through there right now, which is that one is this idea of actually reforming the party and becoming the party that Bernie Sanders wanted them to be. and becoming the party of the working class again, and kind of throwing out the big money interests and all of that. And it's at least nice to hear that people are heading in that direction. But then there's also the other side, wanting to continue to play the kind of centrist game. And I think that the Republicans had lost their way when they allowed kind of the extremist side to take over their party, and Democrats have lost their way since they allowed all of these milquetoast Democrats to come in. All these people that say they're Democrats, but they're really just center right, and they want to keep pushing the party more and more center. And they're saying that, oh, well, that's why Harris lost, because she wasn't center enough, which is just a load of crap. I mean, the Democrats don't really, they don't stand for anything anymore. And as you say, both parties are pro corporation, pro war. They're the same. And at the end of the day, I think it's interesting that at least some of what people are saying, in retrospect to how this election went, is to actually become a left party again. I don't think they'll win. But I'm also seeing a lot of people, one person being, and yes, he's a celebrity of sorts. He's a director in Hollywood, but Adam McKay came out and talked about how he's leaving the Democrat Party and he's going to go green. And I think there are more and more people that are considering that. I mean, he stated, "Who would have guessed lying about Biden's cognitive health for 2 years, refusing to do an open convention for a new nominee, never mentioning public health care, and embracing fracking, the Cheneys, and a year-long slaughter of children in Gaza wouldn't be a winning strategy." And that's, I couldn't have put it better. I just had to read that out.
No, you're absolutely right. And yeah, I've been fortunate enough to be in communication with Adam McKay, and we hope that he will stay. He will stay with the movement. He could be a powerful voice out there. Certainly, his ideology is fully aligned, outside the Democratic Party. But I want to be realistic about the Democratic Party in that this is not a recent switch.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I think the last time you had any, the Democrats aren't even liberals anymore, right? They're conservatives. They are the same people who cheered on the Iraq War in 2003. So the Democrats hold the space where the Republican Party was 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. They are still leaning to the right, even more right wing than maybe the moderate wing of the Republican Party 20 years ago. But the Democrats have not been a working class party since 1980, 1984. I mean, it has been 40 years since the Democrats. I think Walter Mondale was probably the last presidential candidate who you could really reasonably say was a working class guy and stood up for working class values. It was that Walter Mondale sort of coming out of the 70s, the Jimmy Carters, the JFK LBJ wing of the parties through the late 60s and 70s that just petered out in the 80s and gave way to the third way, the Clinton wing of the party, which were, people need to know this, which were explicitly geared towards the corporate sector, the third way Democrats, which are now the New Democrat Coalition, which is, Rick Larson, Susan Del Bene, and Adam Smith. I mean, these are all quote unquote, it's, literally called the New Democrats Coalition. But this is the wing of the Democratic Party that was seeded by the Koch brothers in the mid-90s because they wanted the Democratic Party to be more pro-business. So the Democratic Party was co-opted at least 30 years ago, but in a way that fully separated themselves from the working class. They kept a lot of the rhetoric to appeal to working class people, but the legislation that they pushed was, and so this happened actually within the Democratic Party as people like Newt Gingrich pulled the Republican Party even further to the right, So the Overton window has shifted so far to the right, and so the idea when people say, Well, Joe Biden was the most progressive president we've had, quote unquote, in our lifetimes.
No.
First of all, no, because
No.
Jimmy Carter was, and Jimmy Carter had his own problems. But but even for younger people, you have to put that in the context of how far right the Democratic Party was pushed, in the late 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
So saying most progressive ever in our lifetimes, like, okay, but like not progressive. That is not progressive,
Right.
And it's the same idea. Like when they passed the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, they kept talking about the messaging here is like, well, that's the most climate spending ever. This is a win for climate. Well, it was a fossil fuels first bill.
Yeah.
It required tens of millions of acres of offshore drilling and land drilling, also a couple million of acres of land drilling before they would do any investment. So people who they're able, if you haven't spent any money on climate action ever at all, then yeah, you can go out there in public and say this is the most climate money we've spent ever. Yeah,
Right.
You have never spent any before.
Right.
But that's the Democratic Party sleight of hand so that they can, plausibly, if people aren't paying attention, claim that they are progressive and working for the working class. And you really have to have a political education and an analysis of the actual legislation that is being passed and the votes that are taken, which is what we did with Rick Larson, to let these people know, look, it's a con job. It's a con job. These guys are Republicans from the 80s and 90s now, and they are passing Republican. All this shit about Project 2025, I have said right from the start when it started to become a trope with the Democratic Party. Oh my God, Project 2025, and I was like, Project 2025 has been in the works for 45 years. When Ronald Reagan merged the Republican Party with the Christian Nationalist Moral Majority in 1980, so that they could win that election in 1980 against Jimmy Carter. That's when Project 2025 started. That's when the Heritage Foundation took over the Republican Party. All you're seeing now is Project 2025 is a testament to the failure of the Democratic Party to do anything about what they have known has been on the table for 45 years. The only thing the Democratic Party has done is move us closer to that. They have not been the Democratic Party. Get out of your minds, people. But the Democratic Party is an opposition party to the Republicans. They are not. They have walked hand in hand down the aisle to the doom that we are facing right now, which is climate and economic inequality. This is not solely the Republicans doing this. This is the ownership of the Democratic Party happily being an austerity party on behalf of their because the folks who are donating to, like, the big money donors who are donating to the Democratic Party are donating equally to the Republican Party. Like, both parties are being funded by the same interests, and that is what has brought us to this point right now of economic and climate and foreign policy crisis. It's both parties, and that's why it's reasonable to say we don't even have a duopoly right now. We have a uniparty system. They're
Democrats,
all interest, and it's not the people.
Best case scenario, the Democrats are an opposition party to the progressive base. They're an opposition party to the concept of socialism. They're a progressive.
And one of the first things that they're trying to throw under the bus is progressivism. They're saying, well, it's because the Democrats went too progressive, and that's why they lost this election. If only they didn't get anywhere near.
They fight progressives far harder than they fight Republicans because they are both beholden to the same funders. And I think we're seeing both in Kamala and Trump having to argue about who is fracking harder. Kamala's appeals to militarism, about having the most lethal military force in the world, leaning into Democrats have wanted a war with Iran for decades, and leaning into
my next point. Yep.
into this Middle Eastern war. The reason I think they might not be toast is that I think that what they want is they want to become the new major conservative party, and they see their opportunity as the Republicans lean into white nationalist Christo-fascism, that they can lean into neoliberal fascism. And and take on the mantle. They're hoping the Republicans will become a fringe party and they can become the major conservative party in the country.
And you may be right about that. When I say the Democrats are toast, I mean any illusion that the Democrats are ever going to do anything for what we as progressive activists deem are the important things that we need to get taken care of.
Or even if you just say that you identify as a liberal, I mean, liberalism is nowhere near their policies.
No, I know. This is why I'm saying that the Walter Mondale, maybe Michael Dukakis in '88 could have been considered liberals, but Clinton was not a liberal. Clinton was a conservative.
No, he's not. Yeah.
And then you ended up with conservative options. Just down the line, is all we got was conservative options.
Even Obama stated behind closed doors that if it was the '80s, he'd be considered a moderate conservative.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. No doubt.
Yeah, all are. So let's pivot, or not pivot, but let's
Can I make one more statement really quick before we pivot? Sorry, we haven't had an election episode yet. We got to have one. But something else that I saw, the other thing that the Democrats, I think, are panicking about is just that some of that core base that they thought they'd have no matter what, they lost in this election.
And that is what we have to decide what we're going to do about. Are we going to move to appeal to the 15 million people who didn't show up for the Democratic Party this year?
Well, also even the people that voted for Trump that didn't want to.
Agreed.
Yep.
So there's a segment there, and then there's a large segment that held their nose and voted for Kamala. And I have told those people that you have forever, like, all you got out of this is that you endorse genocide. That's really, you're gonna have to live with that. But are we at that moment where the mask is so fully off that people say we've got no other option but to build outside the Democratic Party? That's the energy that we have to see if we can harness right now. And I don't think our timeline is very long to do that. I think we have to jump right into it and say, all right, everybody, take a sober look at what just happened here. To put your emotions aside and just look at the facts of what has happened in this election, and then hopefully come to the decision that yes, we have to build outside the duopoly. The system is not working. This party is not working. They don't stand for what they it used to be they don't stand for what they claim to stand for. Now, I don't think they even claim to stand for those things anymore. So, as you see, like, the analysis from the conservative pundits who consider conservative Democratic Party pundits, I think, is going to drag the Democratic Party like more to the left. More to the right, and really sort of cement that. All right, they're definitely not working for us.
Yeah, 59% in Michigan of Muslim Americans supported Stein, and 81% supported her in Maryland. So that was big.
That's great.
Yep.
Yeah, and we won a town in Maine where they have ranked choice voting.
That's nice.
So.
Well, so the question becomes, I suppose, because we are at that moment. I don't think buffering. The brain is buffering for a hot second. We have multiple problems because yes, we need to wake people up. We need to. The question that you asked, are we at that moment where people are going to realize the Democrats are not working for us? And I don't know that they are. I say on this podcast often that no one is immune to propaganda. And for the Democrats and the Republicans, both sides, the establishment writ large spends so much money on propaganda. It is just in everything we see, in everything we watch, the pro-military, pro-police, pro-corporation, winner-take-all horse shit that we are just inundated with. So one of the things I was excited about having the Hollywood director sort of leaving the Democratic Party, because part of what we need clearly is we need counter indoctrination. We need to figure out how we can start working and making sure that we are countering and deprogramming the people from this shit. And we do have an opportunity, like you said, Jason. Right now, we're going to have 4 years, like when Trump was elected the first time, when we've got millions of comfortable liberals who are suddenly willing to resist. And we need to tap into that and activate them and, I hate to say the words, radicalize them and move them along the spectrum from their progressive beliefs and do a lot of this fucking online to offline work to get them from being just Facebook and Twitter commenters to being people who are going to get involved in their communities and in politics for real for the first time, and then escalate that, move them up an escalating ladder of actions and beliefs so that they can stay engaged and become engaged in the real fight and work them down that path. So my question becomes both how and what is the vehicle for that, right? Like, I am also a new join. I've like you, I was a Green Party voter for this entire century, with the one time when Obama tricked me with his hope and change progressive campaign. But just recently joined during your campaign, the Green Party. I still feel the Green Party has some issues. I don't feel they really do enough organizing. They don't train their people into being organizers. Shama Sawant's new organization, Workers Strike Back. It from its very first meeting, when it called for a new progressive working class party, it also said it wasn't that. And it was, heartening that they endorsed the Green Party and endorsed Jill Stein's campaign, because one of my questions for them has always been, well, who's building that working class party? What is that working class party? Adam and I have had an episode about what does a working class party even look like. So yeah, let's pivot to, how do we organize? How do we capture this momentum? And what is the vehicle? Because,
well, this is actually what I'm going to be meeting with people later on today, and have met with people over the course of the week, to try and figure out. So from a somebody who is new to the Green Party, I knew that there were structural problems with the Green Party right away. But those structural problems, and actually, it's not even structural problems so much as it's personnel problems. It's, you get with a third party that is not well funded, because the Green Party is, we don't do a lot of fundraising, which is actually something that we need, something that progressives need to understand. I know with the progressives, people who want something different from a working class perspective, let's just call them progressives for now. Although I think the Democratic Party has really trashed that word. We don't need to go in. We don't really need to go into that. But when I say progressives, let's just use that. They have to understand that in order for a movement to be successful, to challenge the billions of dollars that the corporations are willing to throw into this, you have to be willing to vote against the duopoly, right? So you have to commit to saying, I'm not going to be voting for Democrats anymore. And I would say, at least, where there are other options to run for office, which then moves into, like, you have to be willing to support local candidates for offices, or be one yourself. And you have to volunteer your time. You have to volunteer, you have to give your money. You have to be willing to be, and this is the thing that I think breaks the liberals' brains a little bit. Like, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable, right? You have to be willing to be uncomfortable. Like, I got myself to a point many, many years ago where I said, it's more important for me to be the squeaky wheel and to speak out where there are injustices that need to be resolved, rather than to say, well, I'm worried I won't get invited to the next social. That's I think with the time that I spent within the Democratic Party, all of those local party organizations were social clubs. They weren't organizations that existed to hold their representatives accountable to the policy that everybody seemed to agree that they wanted. You know, like, yeah, we want to solve the whole homeless problem, but it was like, all right, are we willing to pressure our city council into building a shelter, or, putting more money towards these services? And what I found was most of the people who show up to those organizational meetings, legislative district or county Democratic Party meetings, they like to say, oh, so-and-so dropped by from the state legislature and they talked to us about the wonderful things that they were doing in the state legislature. And they just sort of, they enjoy having that connection. But then when it comes to like, okay, well, this person voted in a very bad way on this. Well, I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. I don't want to put them on the spot, or I don't want to be the one to bring it up, because then everybody's going to look at me and say, why are you hassling our good representative here? They don't want, like, the liberal mindset. It has no measure of accountability. And this is where, when I spent 4 years on the Washington State Democrats Central Committee, I pushed for accountability. They hated me because I was constantly pushing for accountability. Why is this, and this representative voting for these things? And the answer I got back is, well, they're in a conservative district and they've got to appeal to if they want to get reelected, they've got to be. I'm like, but these three things are really, really bad things. And they go against what we here say in our platform is what we stand for. And they're like, well, we really can't tell them what to do. And I'm like, yeah, you can. In fact, I think you should be telling them what to do. And they didn't want to do it. Like, and that happened at all organizational levels within the Democratic Party. Is the word comes from on high with the DNC. Like, the Washington State Democratic Party is completely controlled by the DNC, the executive board. And this idea that people are coming into it as committee members to vote on resolutions, it's all window dressing. It's all window dressing for the base that says, oh, look, we're doing something. We have a voice in this. Believe me, you have no voice in this at all. You have no voice in the Democratic Party. It comes down from on high, and that's it. And their preferred politicians are groomed from, they'll take, them at a certain level, and they'll mold them into what they want to be, and they'll put the money behind them, and that's it. And they've got a captured representative there. So you have no voice within the Democratic Party. So are those people who are uncomfortable with that, or who don't like the direction of the Democratic Party and want to do a real, again, sober analysis of where the Democratic Party is, the part of it that says, are you willing to personally be uncomfortable in challenging what's going on within the system? Either when you're still within the Democratic Party, are you willing to say, hey, you guys are not doing the right thing, I'm not going to vote for you anymore? Are you willing to disrupt your personal social networks, because people are going to look at you a certain way if you start being that squeaky wheel? Those are the things that, like, I want to know, if when you say I stand up for these things, like, are you really going to stand up for these things?
So I think you've really identified at least an element that a real working class party needs, something the Democrats have never done. Something even that, it's one of my critiques of DSA, because, the squad were these DSA elected candidates. And then when AOC clearly turned her back on the things that she ran on initially and the things she claimed she was going to do, and began cheerleading for the establishment and for the Democratic Party writ large, DSA couldn't hold them to account, wouldn't even vote to censure them, wouldn't kick them out of the party, the organization, right? Because I think DSA still has its. I looked into it, in Bernie's first run, and when I realized they weren't a party, that they were a democratic reform organization, I didn't join, right? But so accountability to the values and the people, the organization, the power that group has generated has got to be forefront. And if people vote against the things that they claim to say, the things they were put in office to do, then the party slash organization has to be able to turn on them, has to be able to organize against them. Politicians cannot be our celebrities nor our saviors. It has to be small d democracy, power held by the common man, right? So I think that you've accurately sort of identified one of those absolute issues that have to happen for a successful working class party. I almost hate to say party because people have this weird idea of what parties are, and I think it bears saying for people who are caught by the propaganda of platforms that parties are these big social welfare organizations, that parties are just nonprofit organizations that successfully get candidates on the ballot.
Mhm.
That's what they're built for. That's what they do. So I'm sometimes not even sure that a party is the right vehicle for the social change. And I don't want to give the impression that I mean people should step away from electoralism. Like, we need to get people in Congress, in the House, in the presidency, in our state houses, in our local offices that are going to be accountable to us, the people. The question is how to hold them responsible for that. And so I want you to talk more about this idea of like holding them accountable for their votes. And it's easier here in Washington with our sort of single subject rule that the laws have to deal with a single subject, and that subject is in the title, where we don't have the fucking omnibus bills that they do at the federal level.
Mhm.
But how do we parse that? How do we parse as a working class party, as a group of citizens who want real change? There's an awful lot of minutia that people in office have to deal with. There's an awful lot of bills, and there is a lot of real legitimate, I mean, this is the politics, right? Is that you have to sort of balance. This is the negotiating that shouldn't be happening with your base. That's where Democrats fucking lie all the time. You shouldn't be negotiating with your base. You should be fighting for your base and pushing as hard as possible as you can for the people. But the negotiating happens once you're in office and with these bills. And so how do you balance that? Oh, I need to vote for this. This is going to help this segment of my population while not abandoning the people who put you there.
Well, I think there's a distinct lack of communication between elected representatives at all levels and the communities that they serve. You know, I think they are, whenever a politician holds a town hall, they tend to be more sort of a fluff of a, you know, let me tell you all the wonderful things that I'm doing, and then somewhat of a rejection or a defensive posture about things that they might be held accountable for, you know, and they're often like curated, like, no, we're not gonna get into anything that's adversarial. So I think when we get into where we get into trouble with that is that most politicians know that they're not serving their base. Most politicians won't just be upfront about, yeah, you know, Boeing essentially keeps me in office and I'm going to work for Boeing. You know, that's what it comes down to. There's no honesty. There's no honesty in sort of political salesmanship. It's a lot of sleight of hand. It's a lot of putting which is why we have to have, you know, a working class party or a working class organization for accountability has to watchdog these things, and the base has to pay attention. This is another part of the, you know, engagement piece that people are very distracted. Like, I may be an extreme example of this, but I almost don't do anything except pay attention to politics, because for me, there's nothing that's more important. Like, you know, I try to I'm a musician, and I carve out some time for myself, to play music and decompress or whatever. But we have to start thinking of politics as a more full-time exercise for, more people. Like that, I used to say, when people say, well, don't bring up politics, I don't do politics. And it's classic trope here. Well, I don't do politics. I don't talk about politics. I don't like politics. Well, nobody really freaking likes politics. It's shit. It's complete shit. You're dealing with shit constantly, and mean people and petty people and people who are in it for personal power. But for the average person to say, I don't engage in politics, well, you have to. You have to. If we are going to make serious change, like
Yep.
if you understand that we have climate disaster absolutely looming, it's on our doorstep, it's already pushing its way through. Oh, hey Ashley, good to see you. It's pushing its way through our front door right now. And if you realize that, end game here could be the destruction of the human species, and you decide, listen, and this is the funny thing, you also have to decide that you care about that. And literally, I talk with people who are like, ain't gonna affect me. I'm like, all right, well, that's one, I disagree, because I think it's gonna affect all of us within 5. But there are people who literally have the mindset like, this is not gonna affect me within my lifetime. This, and they will even say, well, we'll have to let our kids deal with it because we're not going to solve it right here. I'm like, oh, now I have a real problem with that. Because I very much ascribe to the, we don't, I forget, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We are borrowing it from our descendants.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there is massive moral responsibility to protect our kids and future generations that I think is very absent. It's very absent from the American public sense of, responsibility. And I think that I think that is a byproduct of being an intensely individualistic capitalist country, where we have grown up with the message that our circumstances are, at least 99% our own doing, and our own responsibility, and you shouldn't rely on the government for anything, and you shouldn't rely, maybe you rely on your church because people are, they want to say, well, whatever, like charity, but it's a very Dickensian mode of existence where you actually go read these Charles Dickens novels, you go, man, that's horrible conditions, and there's such disparity and whatever. And I'm like, folks, we're living that right now. In the modern age, we are living Dickensian times right now. So what is the inspiration for people to be feel like they are morally responsible outside of themselves? I think it really comes down to that. How do we teach people that, because it's antithetical to capitalist economics, it's a very totalitarian mindset, so I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of education, but we got to morally inspire people to care about something that's bigger than themselves, and say, people will say, oh, a rising tide lifts all boats, and know that that is true, and yet not be engaged in, building that tide.
Right. I mean, it's that's really what I was getting at, I think, when I said we need some counter programming, we need counter propaganda, we need ways to communicate to people the importance of the efforts and to change the paradigm, because the paradigm is a lie primarily. We talked on this podcast a long time ago about, you know, the term meritocracy was coined, I think, in the 50s by a British sci-fi writer as a dystopian future where people, you know, quote, get what they deserve. And we've bought into, we use the word and we even use the framing that it was presented, but it was supposed to be dystopic. It was not supposed to be like, oh yeah, this is what we should aspire to, meritocracy. It's a lie, and society is all of us working together, right? The government ought to be providing for us for the common good, and people don't. It can't be that hard of a step, right? People recognize the fire department as a good, and people want to have someone there to call when their fucking house is on fire. And why is it such a hard step to take that next step forward? Like, we know that we need the bridges, we know that we need transit, we need roads, we need these things that we as a society all rely on, and this should be things that we as a group of people are providing for each other, for ourselves. It shouldn't be a method that we use to extract our value and give it to the corporations and give it to the wealthy. And we've seen such a huge upswing in public squalor and private decadence as we continue to extract from us. We're the most productive society in the history of the world, and yet we're just fucking bleeding all of us dry and giving it to those who have the most already. I agree with you 100%. We need to get people more involved, more educated. They need to pay attention to the politics, even though it is so hard. It's so, and deliberately so, like it is meant to be boring and confusing. They want us disengaged, and it is hard work to take that step from here's a slogan that we all want, and to get down into the nitty gritty of how do we make that happen.
Yeah. And, you know, ultimately, this is the game that is being played. And you can either be a piece on the board just being moved around, or you can participate. And right. When people say, oh, you know, it's not going to affect my life, it already has, and it will continue to do so until you're dead. You know, unless you're a hermit living in the middle of nowhere, and even I would still argue that you're still being manipulated by the system. People act like because they're not participating, they're not involved, but they absolutely are. Well, and one of the things I hear from a lot of people that say they don't vote is, well, I don't want to be called for jury duty. You know, it's, yeah, there's a lot of, you know, animosity towards this concept that you're going to get pulled into an obligation you don't want to participate in.
Well, people want guaranteed outcomes, and you know, they're like, if I'm going to invest my time and money in this, you know, well, what am I gonna get out of it? And not even necessarily on a selfish level of how am I gonna benefit from this? Like, you know, am I gonna invest myself in something that is gonna have quick wins, or is it gonna be a long slog to do this? And the realistic answer is like, man, it's going to be a long slog. And I think a lot of people don't want to mentally gear themselves up for, you know, you're going to get involved and it is going to consume the rest of your life, as it has done for me, right. You know, and maybe I'm not the example of somebody who wants to look, oh my God, that guy has just given his entire life to political system, and he's jaded, and he's, you know, it's, I'm like, yeah, but there's great reward in knowing that you are working towards something that is like Martin Luther King said, and not that I'm comparing myself to him, but you know, the idea, like, you know, we're going to get to the mountaintop. I might not get to the mountaintop with you, but we are going to get to the mountaintop. And we've been saying this through the Stein campaign. Pardon. Like the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But only if you get involved and are actively part of bending it, right? And right. It's going to take It's going to take millions. It's a critical mass that needs to be achieved to where then, oh, now we can start seeing results. And we have been very conditioned in modern society to want quick results. And if we come up with an electoral loss or a couple, like, look what happened with the Bernie campaign. How many people just walked away disillusioned? I gave my time and money to Bernie in 2016. I gave it again in 2020. They stabbed us in the back. There's no point. We have no control in the system. It's a waste of my time. I'm done with all of it. To have people understand that the fight is long. The fight is long and it's ugly and it's bitter. But if we have our minds set on justice, we will eventually get there, even if we don't get to see the outcome. We know, like, I go to bed knowing that my conscience is clear. Like, when I voted for Jill Stein, I was like, I didn't vote for genocide. I wasn't going to vote for Oh, you threw the election to Trump. Let me tell you something. We made it through 4 years of Trump. And if people think that I'm going to sit down and say, oh, we got Trump again, what are we going to do? No, you got Trump. You're going to get out there and fight. And the worst thing that would have happened with a Kamala Harris presidency is the pink hat people would have they would have gone right back to brunch. They would have said, we won. Now we don't have to hold anybody accountable. Yay, our side, go team. This whole team sports aspect to this. Our team won. Yay. And we're just going to let our team now it's in our team's hand. Well, listen, your team is bad. Okay. So we need your accountability. And if it takes Trump being in office for you to, say, okay, well, I've still got to fight this, then good. Get up and fight.
Yeah.
Get up and fight Trump, because you wouldn't have done it for Kamala. And this is what pisses me off about liberals. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think as well, we just live in a time where people are not encouraged to consider a future where they're not involved. And what you do today, like you say, may not have any immediate benefit to you in your lifetime. But what you leave behind, the society that you're aiming for matters more than the immediate gratification of what you can get now. And I think people as Americans, we act like we'll live forever and there's no need to think of a future without us being there.
But not getting involved guarantees that we're not going to be heard, that we're not going to be represented, that there will be a future without us because we're not involving ourselves in it right now. And
Absolutely.
It's just right. It's why I say about organizing being the only answer, because we don't have a choice. Either we build power with others or we allow others to have power over us. I say it all the time, and they have the power over us. And like you said, Jason, like the liberals are unwilling to fight. They are unwilling to organize for fear that it might somehow cause them to lose, like getting involved. It's the most Democrat mindset ever, that you're only going to fight when you're guaranteed a win. You don't fight because it's the right thing to do. You don't fight because there's changes needed. And if there is a positive outcome to the Trump election, it's that now there will be, like I said earlier, millions of these comfortable liberals who might suddenly be willing to resist. They might be willing to step up and do the work and try to fight. And we need to capture that. And I know we've been talking over an hour now.
We actually have some comments from our chat box. If I could add those, we actually have some participation in this episode.
Yeah.
So Ashley here's what she's posted. It's hard to keep. I'll read it out loud for anybody that's listening to this episode when we post it. It's hard to keep up and find out news and what laws are being passed. It makes it difficult to have conversations when no one knows what's going on. She also posted,
that's an education piece that we have to put together. We have to have, and there are some organizations that do this already. You have to, there are watchdog organizations, but I think we need really a well-funded watchdog team that is willing to, like, that's your job. Your paid job is to do. And I think a lot of the stuff on the left is difficult because people are volunteers in this system, and being a volunteer in this system and saying, listen, I would immerse myself 8 hours a day in this for positive outcomes, but I can't do it for free because I got to pay my rent. That's where we, hopefully people with the cash to do it will kick in to where we can build these structures where we can have paid people to do the kind of work that needs to be done on education and messaging and watchdogging, inside and outside the party system. We are in a real economic bind where people are just strapped for time, and they find that their basic needs are unaffordable, and it makes you all the more disillusioned towards getting involved because you're like, I can't get involved enough to the degree that I feel like I'm making a difference. People, we should simply be, fundraising to pay people to do these kind of jobs to get that education messaging out there.
Yep. James the Diamond Sword said, "Amen. We need our voices heard and boosted."
Yeah, well, and this is part of the getting involved. This is part of the being. It's the education. It's the putting yourself into the process, difficult though it is. And I think that, Ashley had said earlier, like, it's hard to know what's happening. And I agree, Jason. We need to have part of, and I keep coming back to what is that working class party need? Like, part of what we maybe need to do is we need to make sure we have circles of activity that are local, that keep people updated. Like, hey, here's what's happening right now. Here's what your state legislature is doing. Here's what your city council is doing. And here's what you need to do. We need you to show up to that committee meeting. We need you to show up to that hearing. We need you to show up to the council meeting. We need your voices heard. Like, that's where you're going to make it heard.
And this is, again, with elected representatives going back to their constituencies, and this is why it's important for us to run at all levels and have people who have our mindset be a presence on all committees and all, like city, on all councils, because it is hard to then, you have that person, like, your commitment as being a member of this is you're going to go back and you're going to disseminate, here's what we did on the council meeting today, rather than this is, oh, we're just doing our thing, like the Democrats and Republicans, like, we're just doing our thing, and maybe once in a while we'll put out a communication, like once a month we'll put out a communication that's a real surface overview of whatever. But if we have somebody with a watchdog mindset actually being on the board, then they can go back and they can say, here's the nitty gritty of what we have to be fighting against and what we have to be cautious of and what we should be pushing for. It's real important to get people elected to local seats.
It is. Okay. So I want to segue, because we've been talking about an hour 15-ish, maybe not quite that long, but we've been going for a while, and I know you've got another meeting.
I do have to get to another meeting soon. I actually told them they have to wait for me a little bit till we wrap up here.
I appreciate that. So yeah, here in Washington, at least here in Seattle, I'm going to say, like, we had a very positive. Alexis Mercedes rank won overwhelmingly over Tanya Wu. And she is a local organizer, a local activist. We finally are going to have a progressive voice on city council. In the state, Sean Scott won, and he is a DSA member, and he, maybe identifies socialist.
It's a good win. I hope he sticks to his principles. I hope he doesn't get co-opted. I know Sean. I know of his activism. I would have voted for him if I'd lived in the 43rd district, but again, is Sean going to get in there, and is he going to come back to the public and say, here's the bad stuff that's going on, and this is what we're going to need to do to fix it? I think that messaging, that public messaging, is like, are you in there to go along to get along? Are you in there to be a fighter? Because I guarantee the messaging from the system to you as a freshman in that position is, don't step out of line. You'll be a one-term rep. We'll guarantee it. And I think you got to go in there like, whatever, gangbusters. You got to go in gangbusters. You got to tell them, like, I'm working for the people, and that's all. That's all.
When we finish, I'm gonna email him and see if we can't get him on the show, because I want to ask that question, because I would rather have someone who would be a one term and they're there fighting and they're there
Yep.
organizing and building the movement that we need.
Which ironically is something that AOC said that she would do. We've got her on tape. Yes, I would rather be a one person and know that I got in there and I fought for my constituents. And like, how long does that actually last?
Right.
When the pressure is put on you, as it will be, you know, do you resist that pressure and say, listen, man, because, you know, the reality is, and I've told this story before, but there was a one-term congresswoman from Illinois. Her name was Marie Newman, and she was in from 2020 to 2022. And she was, in terms of like progressive legislation writing, and she was prolific. And she got districted out when Illinois lost a congressional seat and they redistricted. The Democratic Party, which is completely in control of the state of Illinois at the state level, they do the redistricting. They put her in with another progressive, and they were like, well, we're going to lose one. We're going to guarantee it's going to be a progressive. We'll let you guys duke it out. And she refused to primary the sitting progressive, and she went back to her old district and lost in the primary to a very corporate Democrat. But that was the intent. That was the intent of the Illinois state legislature. Again, parties controlled by the DNC, to say, we're going to get rid of this problematic progressive. We're going to do it all within the rules. We're just going to district her out, just like they districted me out,
Mm-hmm.
you know. She talked afterwards, and I was in a closed room meeting with her, and she said they take all these freshmen. There's a lot of fanfare. You get elected, you know, yay, welcome to Congress. We're so happy to have you with us. And then they take you in a side room, and they literally, Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, James Clyburn, Democratic Party leadership, they sit down and they say, we know you're very excited to be here. You probably have some big ideas about what kind of changes you want to make, and we're here to tell you, sit down, shut up, do what you're told, or you'll be a one-term representative. Like, she told us, like, yeah, they gave us the talking to, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's disgusting.
You won't get your bills passed. You will not. We will basically we will marginalize you. Now, she did her thing anyway, and she wrote tons of progressive legislation and submitted it. And her reward for that was they absolutely districted her out. Yep. So that is the system we're up against. So knowing that, will Sean Scott say, I'm going in for the people. I'm going in for the people, or will he say, you know what? I gotta play ball here. It's gonna slow my roll some, but you know.
Well, and I think we need the people who aren't gonna play ball necessarily. We need people who are gonna. We talked about, you know, what does that working class party look like? We need the people who are accountable to us and who will communicate with us. And Ashley had said in the chat, like, some education of what it means to be involved would be great. So let's wrap this up, Jason, with your thoughts on how, because you've got meetings with groups that are talking about this right now today. How do we capture that energy? How do we do the better organizing? How do we put the structures in place that are going to educate us and empower us and make sure that we know how to get involved and can stay involved? Like, how do we build this?
Well, so I'll talk about it from a Green Party perspective. I mean, the Green Party very much wants to be in coalition. We don't want to blow up the Green Party. The Green Party has a long history of standing for particular platform principles. We have a good nationwide party structure, but we need to bring new people in, right? A lot of the Green Party, we've had low fundraising, we've had tepid messaging. We really have to become not a hey, we're a hippie fringe group here, which is, I think, a lot of people like will picture the Green Party as like, hey, like we got to be very aggressive. We've got to lay out clearly the failures of the duopoly and why a third party is the only way for the future. But we also have to say to people, if you come into the party, we have ways to support you as an activist. And I think a lot of people they just don't know what to do. And I don't think the Green Party at a national level or at state party levels, although it's to varying degrees, I think the Washington State Green Party is actually really good at helping people come into the party, whereas a lot of other, state parties are not. That if you come into the party, that we are going to have support systems for you. We're going to have, we're going to have networks. We're going to have fundraising. We're going to give you, the tools that we need to go out into your community and grow the party. The Green Party does not exist in all states. We've probably got about 35 state chapters. And some of those chapters are really active, and some of them they've had the same leadership for decades. And so we need to bring people in, encourage them to take on leadership positions. And I really think, what do I want to say? It's hard for people to do this all as a volunteer organization. And the Democratic Party doesn't do this as a volunteer organization. The Democratic Party has paid people, running their salaried positions. And I think unless we get some salaried positions for people who are doing this dedicated full time, we stand to lose that momentum, because it is very hard. I will tell you, I've had a full-time job the entire time I've been running for Congress and managing I would like to cut my job loose, but it's the only way I get my health insurance. So we have to find ways for people to be personally supported in their lives while they are doing the work for the cause. And that is something that we have not been able to figure out yet, because the fundraising hasn't come in. So we've never really had fundraising messaging. We're like, oh, pay your $15 monthly dues, but there's not any more, there's no more fundraising drives than that. And I think we need to get out the message, if we really want to grow this, it has to be in a capacity where we can pay people to do the work, so that we have that constant level of support, especially at the state party level, but even, at local and city levels. I think we need to have that.
All right, great. Thank you, Jason. I'm going to wrap this up. If you are out there listening and or watching, in line with what Jason said, look up your state Green Party. Go ahead and get in contact with them. Check out their website. Join the state party. In some states, you can register as a voter, and that makes you a member of the Green Party. In some states, like in Washington, it's a dues-paying organization, because we really only recognize the major parties in Washington State. Donate to these parties. You heard what Jason said. We need people who are going to get paid to do this. We need people who are part of the education. It would be great if we had a trainer, a Green Party organizer who was, training people how to organize. It would be great if people knew that they were donating, hey, pay your $10 a month to make sure that we can pay this person to do X, Y, or Z. And, you can be part of that. Click. We don't have a link for you, right? Because I can't put 50.
Well, the Green Party National is basically just gp.org. It's very easy, and you can, anybody can Google their state Green Party, and you'll find the website for those that have functional websites, and get involved. California, Washington, Oregon, Hawaii, Florida, Virginia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. I mean, all of these, New York, they've all got functional state parties that need to grow, and we need to harness this energy.
And if by chance you don't have a functional one in your state, then reach out to the national party.
Absolutely.
They'll talk you into how to start making a chapter in your state.
Yep. And we want to do that. There's places remember when we went to Idaho, Mark? There's no Green Party in Idaho. And people were like, I've never heard of the Green Party. And this is why we wanted to get Jill on the ballot in Idaho, which we did do, by the way, thanks to our efforts. We got, and for those of us listening, when I say our efforts, I'm talking directly me and Mark, went out there to gather signatures in Idaho. But we want that name to be about on the ballot. So there's some name recognition there. And then people who are inspired, yes, we will support you to create your own chapter and start growing. We want the Green Party of Idaho to be functional, and it's not functional right now.
All right. And so as I started the episode by saying, real democracy, it's not a spectator sport. You've got to be involved. You got to get offline. You got to get to work, because there's a lot of work to be done. And if you want things changed, we have to be the ones to change it. There's no one coming to save us. We have to save ourselves, right? And we got to get busy. Jason, thank you so much. It is always a privilege to talk with you, and I'm so glad that I've gotten to know you and work with you over the years. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate you, man.
Appreciate it. I'm humbled. Thank you, and nice to meet you, Adam.
Yeah, same here, Jason.
All right.
Thanks for putting in the work.
We'll catch up on the flip side.
Absolutely. Thank you so much,
Bye.
everyone.
Some answers, a little bit of truth. Some answers, a little bit of truth. Some answers, a little bit of truth. A little bit of truth. A little bit of truth. Oh, dig deeper. Keep looking for the proof. Dig deeper. Keep looking for the proof. Dig deeper. Keep looking for the proof. Keep looking for the proof. Keep looking for the proof. Oh, some answers. Some answers.